these, year after year, the suggestions that our revenues have been off, it's by under 1% generally. And the budgets that they crafted were resilient enough to deal with those adjustments as they came. We heard every fall over the last 3 years, we heard from some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, not Chairman Scheer is not one of them, how we might have to make mid-year budget cuts, et cetera, et cetera. Hasn't happened because the budgets have been resilient enough to deal with those, again, relatively small shortfalls. This governor is the first governor to ever realistically deal with the pension deficit. Under Governor Whitman, we made adjustments. We decided that the pension system was overfunded, and at the time it seemed to be. The pension system started to become underfunded in the early 2000s. And talk about kicking can down the road. Nothing was done with it or to it. Governor Corzine sporadically did a couple of things, but we had years where we had 7% growth where we made no pension contributions. So when times were flush, we weren't making pension contributions. It was those years that led us to these downgrades that we're having happen right now. Governor Christie is the first governor to say, we got to solve this. I applauded that. Many folks on the other side of the aisle did as well. Only fair. But let's talk about the millionaire's tax for a second. The problem that led us to this revenue shortfall is that we already over-rely on upper income earners for a huge portion of our budget. Top 1% of taxpayers pay about 40% of the income taxes. Top 400 taxpayers pay 10% of all the taxes. We are already down the path where we are over-relying on these people, and that's what leads to this volatility. If we relied on these upper income earners less, this revenue shortfall would be less because it's the upper earners that are so volatile. They can move income from one year to another. The problem with some of the revenue sources and revenue enhancements is you got to look at the people in New Jersey who are already the highest tax people in the country, or maybe second or third, depending on who's doing the math, but they're still, they are taxed very heavily, and say, we can't do the things, the basic services we need to do for you without taking more of your money is hard. They're very skeptical about it. So there's got to be a lot of discussion, and it's going to have to be a holistic approach here. But we have to demonstrate to folks and build credibility with them that we've tightened the belt as much as we can. And it's a hard argument to make. There's going to be a lot of effort is going to have to be expended in building credibility of the legislature in particular, before we can get there. The rating agency's rating at any given moment is the product of 10 or even 15 years of policy of the state. This governor, I would argue, has been one of the most fiscally responsible governors we've had in the past 20 years. If you look at the rate of debt increase, and this came from OLS, I'll share the numbers with you, in the 8 years previous to this governor, and then the net debt increase under this governor, it was 10 to 13% a year, every year in those previous 8 years. Under this governor, it's been 2 to 3% increase.
But it's still been.
I would argue that he has been fiscally prudent. If you look at the portions of the budget that are not debt, that are not pension payments, and that's where the real increase in our expenditures has been, and increasing our obligation, meeting our obligation to the pension system is fiscally responsible, no question. And I said before, Governor Corzine didn't do it in years we had huge growth, chose not to make pension payments when we were underfunded. And of the portion of the budget, the $25 billion that you could argue is discretionary, that is lower now by several $billion than it was in 2008.